Today, we are going to be hearing from one of my colleagues, Sarah Allen. Many times you hear her talking about DNA. She's our in-house DNA expert, but she has a wider range of interests and is an incredible researcher. So we are so happy that she has agreed to give us this presentation on New York, and hopefully everybody is excited to hear and see. So Sarah, if you'd like to go ahead and share your screen, and away we'll go.
Today, we're going to be talking about New York State genealogy. I put in the word state on purpose because I wanted you to know that I'm not really going to talk about New York City. That could be a whole different talk. I will mention New York City a couple times, but this is mostly a talk about upstate New York. So we're going to breeze through some of this. So I just wanted to give you a little bit of background about early history and geography. You can see that this map of 1799, you can see that parts of New York that were settled were basically the eastern part and the southern part. And you can see that the great parts of the northern part of the state and the western part of the state were not yet developed at that time period of 1799. Now, as you know, the first peoples that were living in the area that is now New York State were Native American tribes. And this is a map that is probably not super accurate as far as you can see the little boundary lines between the different tribes. I would imagine that those are pretty fluid and that people move back and forth between those. But at least it gives you kind of an idea of a general region of New York that maybe the different tribes were living in. Now, as far as Europeans, the first Europeans that were in New York were explorers, and we have an Italian explorer in 1524 who was on the tip of Manhattan. Then we have Jacques Cartier, who was a French explorer that was up on the St. Lawrence River in 1535. This is on the border between US and Canada. And then in 1609, we had Henry Hudson, who was sailing for the Dutch East India Company. And he discovered basically the waterway that is now named after him, the Hudson River. And he sailed up to modern day Albany, and the Dutch established a trading post there and colonized this area and called it New Netherland. This is in 1614. And their first settlement was called Fort Nassau, and that is now in the area that is Albany. New Amsterdam was their capital, the Dutch capital, and that is modern day Manhattan area. Now in 1664, the British came in and conquered basically New Netherland. And so it became a British colony called the province of New York. And of course, it was one of the original 13 colonies that sparked the War for Independence in 1776. Okay, now let's get down to researching in New York. And let me say that there are a few quirks. And I'm using the word quirk. I could use a different word. But there's some good things and some bad things about researching in New York. And some of the challenges are that there's been some record loss. There was a fire at the state capitol in 1911. It destroyed many of the colonial records, especially the British ones. So this is pre-1776. And I don't know about you, but my family was living there pre-1776. So this is kind of a devastating loss for those types of records. Then another challenge would be that while most states started recording marriages at the beginning of settlement, New York did not pass any laws basically saying that the government needed to, or that individuals needed to go and get a marriage license from the government to get married. So this did not happen until 1881. So you can imagine, I told you that New York was started to be settled in 1614 with the Dutch at Fort Nassau. So 1614 to 1881, no official marriage records were recorded basically at the government offices. Like today, we go down to the courthouse to get a marriage license. That was not happening in New York until 1881. So it's a big loss as far as trying to figure out who was getting married to whom in New York State. So I have some strategies for that, how to get around that situation a little later on in the talk. There were some other records that New York kind of kept haphazardly, including land deeds. So this is another loss. If your people were from an area where they weren't recording land deeds down at the courthouse until later on in the 1800s, then that's going to also put some roadblocks in your way. Now, having said that, here's a happy quirk. So New York, I think, is really the only state that I know of that does this. They have a whole system of local historians that are basically there to promote the history of their county or their area. And so there will be a county historian in every county. And this is mostly a paid position as far as I understand. They have an office, they have records at that office, they have office hours, regular office hours. And they answer phones, they answer emails, they answer mail-in queries, most likely. And most of the ones that I've dealt with have been very helpful. So you definitely want to use them as a resource. There are also, besides the county historian, so that's the hierarchy, there's a county historian, then there's a town historian and a city and a village historian. These, I believe, are mostly volunteer positions. And so as a volunteer position, you know, you're going to find some are better than others. Some of the volunteers may have, you know, circumstances in their life where they can't volunteer as much right now, and you contact them and it's a bad time for them and they might not get back to you right away or something like that. So just keep in mind that those are mostly volunteers. Now, what is a town historian? So in New York State, the usage of the word town is basically not the same as it is here in Indiana, for instance. So in Indiana, we would consider a town a small municipality. In New York, it's considered a subsection of the county, sort of like a township, as we would use it here in Indiana. So the counties will be divided into a number of towns, probably 10 to 15, depending on the size of the county. And each of those towns will have a town historian. And so that is another level that you want to contact. Once you learn what town your family was living in, you want to contact the town historian. Then if your family was living in a city or village, you could also contact the city or village historian. And so a village is what they're going to call a small municipality in New York, and a city would be a larger municipality. So the town also has a town clerk who records births and deaths and some other records. And so you might have occasion to need to contact the town clerk as well. Now, how do you find out about these local historians in New York? Well, there is a link in your syllabus. You should be able to find that. I think it's under local historians in the list of websites. But I've had great luck with Googling. So if you Google, for instance, the county historian for Yates County, this came up, this website came up. And you can see here that they've got their office hours, they have some contact us information. And over on the left-hand side, they have some records that apparently they have access to there at their office. So that was just Googling Yates County, New York historian is how I got this. And you can do the same thing with the town historians and the village historians. So the town of Benton is in Yates County. So I just did town of Benton, Yates County historian, and I got this page, which is for the whole town. And you can see over to the left, there's a link to the town clerk, which you might need to contact that person for some vital records. And then at the very bottom, there's a link to the town historian off of this Town of Benton webpage. There's also a phone number at the top that probably gets you to the town clerk, and they might be able to transfer you to the historian as well. So hopefully you can use those resources. Now, if I just totally confused you, there is a book by Gordon Remington that is called New York State Towns, Villages, and Cities, a Guide to Genealogical Sources. And this will explain it, I think, a little more, the structure of the government in New York, and highlights important sources for different towns, villages, and cities. So I'm going to refer to a number of print guidebooks for New York in this talk, because there have been quite a few that have been written to try to bridge the gap with New York research. And because people struggle with it so much, there have been a lot of guides that have been written that have been great help to me. And so I hope they would be a great help to you as well. And having said that, let's segue into a couple print resources. So basically, with New York research being what it is, that it is more difficult because of the record losses and the challenges that we talked about, you're going to just want to turn over every single stone that you can. You don't want to leave anything undone. So you're going to look anywhere and everywhere to find resources and to find information about your family in New York. So this is a really great book. It's put out by the New York Genealogical Society, and it's called New York Family History Research Guide and Gazetteer. And this has statewide information about researching in New York in general, and then it has chapters on each county. So one of the counties that I'm interested in is Ulster County. So there's a whole 11 pages in that book on Ulster County. And you can see on the left, we've got a map, and those are the towns of Ulster County. And then on the right, I've just reproduced one of the pages on one of the 11. And you can see that you might not be able to see this, but on the left side of the page, it's giving us archives and libraries that will have resources about Ulster County. And on the right-hand side of the page, there's a selected print and online resources for Ulster County. So again, 11 pages. This is going to be really helpful if you're researching Ulster County. And remember, this book covers all the counties. So you need to get a copy of this book, or you need to maybe order it on interlibrary loan. You probably can get it from your interlibrary loan office of your local library. Another thing that you want to be sure that you do is look at periodicals. Periodicals has been a lot of periodicals have tried to bridge the gap and to print a lot of helpful information about New York. So New York research. So to search periodicals, my recommendation is to use PERSI, which stands for the Periodical Source Index. This is an index that is put out by the Genealogy Center, so by the library that I work at. And it's basically indexing over 10,000 genealogy and historical periodical titles that are owned by the Genealogy Center. And the index in PERSI is indexed by surname, so last name only, by place, or by keyword. So it's not an every name index of the names of people that are listed in the periodical, but the surname index can help you a great deal. Now you access this on our website, and I'm going to show you that in a second. And this is, of course, in your handout as well. And once you find an article that is of interest to you, you can certainly come here in person to view it if you're in the Midwest area, or you could try to order a copy from the publisher or perhaps get a copy on interlibrary loan, or you can order a copy from us for a small fee. So this is what it looks like. So you're on our website, and this is genealogycenter.org, or the website that's given there. Either way will get you there. And you can see that you're going down a little ways on the right-hand side of the page, and there's an icon that basically says periodical source index down by the red arrow. So you want to click on that. And then since we're talking about New York, I would suggest that you start with this locality search by going ahead and clicking on United States. And then at the next page, you can put in the state that you want and the county. And I'm going to stick with Ulster County since we've been talking about Ulster County. And go ahead and do a search. Then what comes up is basically subjects about Ulster County. So we have, you can go ahead and pick the subject that you're interested in. And I'm going to pick church records because there's 222 articles covering church records in Ulster County. And when I do that, I get a listing of all 222 articles. And this is the top 4. And I believe that they're in alphabetical order by the article title. And you can see there, if any of these articles are of interest to you, you have the information to get a hold of it. You have who published it. You have the periodical title and date. You have our call number. If you happen to be here, you can come here and find it at that call number, and so forth. So again, like I said, you want to be sure that you are using the periodical source index, especially for hard to research areas like New York State. This, I'm just going to highlight 2 periodicals that have been published in New York. And this one is the New York Genealogical and Biographical Record, which is put out by the State Genealogy Society. It is more of a scholarly journal, and it is indexed in Percy, and they treat basically a family line, and they will do a whole workup on that family. So if your family happens to be one of the families that's treated in this periodical, you're in luck. This would be wonderful. Another one is called Tree Talks, and this is put out by the Central New York Genealogical Society, and they cover a wide number of counties. So they will kind of print things about different counties in New York, and it's not as formal of a periodical as the first one we just talked about. And it is also indexed in Percy. Okay, let's move on to major categories of genealogical records. So vital records in New York State. This is a kind of complicated, so I'm going to leave this slide up for a minute. And this session, I should mention, is being recorded. And so you will be able to watch this on YouTube after we get done editing it. So birth and death records in New York State, the state registration began in 1880. It was a little spotty with how many people actually went and registered until about 1913. These records are available from the State Department of Health and the local registrar in the town or place of birth or death. There are exceptions. New York City has a completely different method, which we will talk about a little later in the program. Albany, so if your ancestor lived in the city of Albany, Buffalo, or Yonkers before 1914, you have to contact the local registrar only. There are privacy limitations. You have to, if you're trying to get something that's 100 years old, that's no problem. But if you're trying to get something more recent with a birth record, it has to be less than 75 years old, or it has to be more than 75 years old. And with a death record, it has to be more than 50 years old, unless you're a direct lineal descendant of that person. So you have to have more of a family connection with the person to get those more recent records. And these records are not available online. And so these are just kind of your standard, I think, boilerplate kind of forms that are used in a lot of states. So this is a birth from 1911 and a death from 1912. So there are some online birth and death indexes. These are on Ancestry and Family Search. I cannot be certain that all counties and all years are included in these indexes. But if you do find somebody in the index, then you've got a certificate number and you've got some other information that you'll need to give to them at the New York State Department of Health to get the full birth and death certificate order. So be sure that if you do find somebody in an index, you kind of copy down that information. As far as the marriage record goes, it's kind of the same. Statewide registration began in 1881. There was not total compliance for a while, and you can get those from the Department of Health in Albany and the town or city clerk where the marriage took place. Again, there's the exception of New York City and Albany, Buffalo, and Yonkers prior to 1914. There's also privacy limitations where it has to be over 50 years old for you to be able to get it, unless you're a lineal descendant. Now, some of these early New York marriages have been put online. And again, I don't think this is everything. So I don't think it's all counties. I don't think it's all years. But Ancestry and Family Search both have some. And Ancestry has 8 million records in a marriage index that goes from 1881 to 1967. So you can use that marriage index to help you order the records from the health department or the town clerk. Here's a marriage license application for 1911. And a marriage certificate for 1918. And here's the Department of Health website, which is where you're going to get most of these records. Now, adoptions. So I work a lot with people that are adopted and trying to find their birth family. And New York used to be a closed adoption state. And so you might have run into this. However, did you know that the law has changed? So as of 2019, you can order pre-adoption birth certificate. This would be for the adoptee or their direct lineal descendant. And that would be a child of the adoptee, a grandchild, a great-grandchild. In New York State, you order it from the Department of Health, again, the State Department of Health. And in New York City, you order from the New York City Department of Health. And there's information on the website, and I believe I have that in your handout. So if you tried before, like in 2017, and you got a negative response, you want to try again now that the law has changed. Okay, now we talked about how there's fewer vital records than we would like to see for New York. So vital record substitutes. So in general, there are newspaper articles. People put birth announcements, marriage announcements, and obituaries in a newspaper sometimes. So this would be a substitute for a vital record. Church records, such as a christening, a baptism, a confirmation, a marriage, or a funeral record, could substitute as a vital record that we don't have. The mortality schedules for the federal census, 1850 to 1880, will give us information about deaths that happened the previous year. And also the state census for New York, 1865 and 1875, will include some deaths and marriages in the last year. If the death was investigated by a coroner, there ought to be a coroner's inquest record, and that can give you more information about date and place of death and manner of death. Probate records will also give you more information about a death, and then Bible records. And those can be found in a variety of places. And you just have to kind of poke around and look for who might own the family Bible that you need. Now, since I mentioned church records, let's segue into church records here for a minute. there is a great book called How to Find Your Family History in U.S. Church Records by Sunny Jane Morton and Harold Henderson. And this explains the types of records that are generated by religious organizations and where to find them. So if you are at a loss, if someone suggests to you, oh, go look at church records, and you don't know what that means, or you don't know how to start out working with church records, you might want to consult with this book because it will give you some ideas and hopefully get you started in the right direction. Now, as far as New York goes in general, the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society website, they have digitized some church records from all over New York State. This is a members only, well, they have a members only section of their website, and I believe that this information is behind that members only site. But you may be able to kind of look on the site and see what they have there before you join, so you can see whether it'd be worth your while. If your ancestors were Catholic and they were from New York City, Find My Past database is starting to put some of those records on their database. And that's also a paid database that you have to subscribe to. I found a lot of great New York City Catholic records on there, but it doesn't seem like it's all parishes and all time periods. Periodicals, we already talked about Percy, but just make sure you're checking that. You can contact the church itself or denominational archives. You can consult with the guidebook that I just mentioned. You can talk to the town or the village historian. This might be useful if you don't know what churches were located in the area where your family was living in the early times. Perhaps the town or village historian could give you some hints about that and say, well, there was a Methodist church and a Baptist church, and this is what I know about them. So hopefully that will help you. Now, there's also the Family Search Catalog for the county, the town, and the village. If you find something in the Family Search Catalog, it may be digitized online or it may not be. It may be something that's only in a book format, and you might be able to find it at a library near you, or it may only be available at Salt Lake City at the Family History Library. So there's a lot of different options there, but I'm going to walk you through really quick what I mean by looking at the Family Search Catalog. So this is the Family Search Catalog here, and this is also linked in your handout. So you will have the URL to get directly to this page. You can see that you want to enter a place in the place box there. And so I put in Ulster County, New York, and this is what came up. So it gave me this heading for United States, New York, Ulster. So I just started typing Ulster in the box, and this is what came up. So then you go ahead and do a search, and you get basically two things. You get this list of topics about Ulster County, New York. And you can see down at the bottom, there's church history and church records. And so since we're talking about churches, that's where I would go to start looking. But the other thing would be, you want to look at places within Ulster County also. So the top red arrow that I have listed on the screen there will get you into the villages and the towns of Ulster County. And you need to search through those as well to find church records. But then when you get into the list of church records that they have, you'll be able to see whether they're online or in print or what the story is, and kind of take the next step to trying to access those. All right, let's move on to census records. Beyond the federal census, which is taken every 10 years on the zeros, New York actually put out state censuses, and this is really helpful for people that are researching New York. And those were mostly on the fives, so on years ending in 5. And we have another helpful guidebook here. This is a book called New York State Censuses and Substitutes by William Dollarhide. And so he's going to tell you the state censuses that were taken, but also census substitutes. And census substitutes would just be records that are listings of people who were living in a certain place at a certain time. So you can kind of pinpoint where your ancestors there, that type of thing. So this is also a book that you should consult. So the state censuses, like I said, were taken on the 5s, and basically a lot of the earlier ones were lost. But by 1855, most of those survived, and then going forward to 1925. So, and they're on Ancestry and Family Search. You should be able to access them there. And you should try to find your family in these censuses, because your family might have only been listed in one of those before they moved, or something else, happened to the family, and perhaps they split up or something. So definitely look at the state censuses. Okay, New York property records. I'm really going to skim over this, but I did want to give you some ideas about some of the quirks of New York again. So in New York, we have colonial land records, and those would be the Dutch, were there first, and then the British. Now, a lot of the British colonial records were lost in the fire, and I think some of the Dutch were as well. So what's left is at the New York State Archives. And these would be state records, meaning people are purchasing land or getting land grants from the state. Then there's manorial records and patents. And this is kind of quirky. New York has these, I think New Jersey has these, perhaps a couple other states have these, but not very many. And these records are in private hands, so a lot of them. Now, what do I mean by manorial records? So a manor was a large tract of land purchased by an individual and leased out to tenant farmers. So if your family did not own land, you might be in luck if they leased land from one of these, in one of these manors or these patents. Now, this is in your handout, so I'm not going to go over this, but there is a good source on manorial records and where to find them in the book called Landlord and Tenant in Colonial New York. So do check that out. Here at the Genealogy Center, we have the Robert Livingston Papers, which is a manor that is primarily located in modern-day Columbia County, New York. This is 57 rolls of microfilm, includes family papers, correspondence, day books, rent rolls pertaining to this family and their manor. There's also a print guide to the microfilm. And we're not the only library that would have this set of microfilm. I'm sure that others do as well. Another New York land kind of a manor or patent is the Beekman patent. And this is in modern day Dutchess County. And I have shown the page that lists my family that was on the Beekman patent. And Frank Doherty is publishing a print series of books called The Settlers of the Beekman Patent. He is still working on it. I believe he's in the S's or the T's. And he has 14 volumes that have already been published. And he's kind of summarizing the family that he has found that's living on the Beekman patent, and he's putting in, genealogical information about them, as you can see from this excerpt that I have provided there. So it's a really helpful book if your family was on the Beekman patent. So you want to check that out. If they were anywhere near that Dutchess County area, just check that out. Okay, so after people are buying and selling land between individuals, then you want to look at county deed records. And deed records should have been recorded from the time of the founding of the county. But apparently in New York, it wasn't mandated that they do so. And so it wasn't mandated until 1830. So you can see that there's a gap there where some counties may not have been recording them prior to 1830. So again, it's a little quirky. Hopefully the county that you need has the land records that you need. So these deed records would usually be at the courthouse in some kind of office at the courthouse, or they might be at the city or the town clerk's office. I have heard of that happening as well. So kind of keep your eyes open for where they might be. And there are also, some of them are on Family Search, I should mention. Probate and estate records. So real quick, types of probate records. If the person died having written a last will and testament, then that's a testate estate. And someone who is intestate, that means they died without having a will or testament. But either way, there's various records that would be created to settle an estate. And there might be guardianship records if there were minor children involved, or if there was an adult who was incapable of caring for themselves and needed a guardian. And New York calls the court that oversees probate the surrogate's court. So that is who would have the records in New York of the county probate records. It would be the surrogate's court. Ancestry, Family Search, and American Ancestor databases all have some online probate records for New York, but I do not believe that they have all. So you're just, searching each one to see what they have and if it's what you need. But remember, you may have to go to the county or contact the county to get them out of the courthouse. And there's been a helpful book written. Again, this one is called New York State Probate Records. It's by Gordon Remington, and it will give you the ins and outs of New York State probate records and how to research them. So again, another book that you should become familiar with. Okay, court records. We're really not going to talk about court records, just to say that there are definitely, and this is the true in each state, but there are definitely 3 different levels. And so you have your federal courts, you have state courts, and you have county courts. Depending on who had the jurisdiction in the case, the federal courts are going to be at the National Archives New York City branch. State courts would be at the New York State Archives in Albany, and then the county courts would be at the courthouse in individual counties. Immigration and naturalization records, which are court records. A lot of people have immigrants that came in and lived in New York State. Where would their naturalization record be? Well, that's also kind of a conundrum. Naturalizations can take place in any of the courts that we just talked about. Most likely they'll be in the county or the federal. If your people came in the colonial times and you believe that they would have naturalized, you want to try print materials and possibly checking out what they have at the New York State Archives. County court records, especially for pre-1906, that's a good place to check, and Family Search will have some of those. 1906 to 1956, the U.S. Citizen and Immigration Service, abbreviated USCIS, will have copies of the naturalization records. So they'd still be in the appropriate court, but there also would be a copy at USCIS. So if you're having trouble finding them in the court records, try ordering from them instead. And then there's the National Archives branch in New York City, as I said, for the federal naturalizations. Now, Ancestry, Fold 3, and Family Search all have some New York State naturalization indexes and records. I don't believe any one of the 3 is actually complete with every one of the naturalization records. So again, you're looking through, you're making sure that they have it or they don't have it, and so forth, before you try to order it from the county or from the court. This is just a quick primer on how to do Family Search naturalization. So here's the New York County Naturalization Records search page. And you can see that you could search for a name in the search boxes up at the top right, but perhaps not all of these are indexed on Family Search. There's a great many Family Search records that are unindexed, that are on their site that you can only get through browsing. So down at the bottom where the red arrow is where you can browse through what they have for naturalizations. So you click on that and you're going to get a list of counties. And I clicked on Schoharie County in the red box. And what came up underneath it there is a list of Schohari naturalization indexes and then records. And these are browsable, so you can just go in and go through them page by page looking for the names that you are looking for. Military records. Now, you might be disappointed by the slide. I have exactly one slide about military records, and that is this book. I have used this book extensively. If you have a Revolutionary War ancestor from New York State, you absolutely need to look at this book. It's called New York and the American Revolution by Eric Grunset. And again, there are chapters on each county in New York. So if you know the county where your man was living when he signed up for his service, then you go to that county and you start looking through the sources. So it's basically a source guide for how to find their records. So very good book. And Eric Grunset has written these books for most of the 13 colonies. And I believe he's still working on writing the others. So there will be a book like this for New Jersey and a book like this for North Carolina and so forth. Newspapers. Okay, remember I said newspapers are going to be your friend because of the lack of other vital record information in New York. So newspapers is going to be a great substitute for some of that information. There's a couple of free online newspaper sites for New York, and this is one of them. It's called Old Fulton New York Postcards. And it's a very quirky site, as you can tell. And there is a kind of rudimentary search function over there on the left-hand side of the screen where the red arrow is. You can certainly try to use it. And I have used it before. And once I got the hang of it, I could find things. There is another search interface for the same site, and it is called Fulton Search. And these are both in your handout, so you can have the URLs. And this is just a different way to search the same site. And it's a little more friendly searching wise, I find it to be. If you don't find it in the one site, try the other and vice versa. Another site that is also free for New York is called NYS Historic Newspapers. And this one you would go in by county, and then you can search by county for the person or the term that you are looking for. Now, not every newspaper has been put online, right? Everybody knows that? Okay, so the New York State Library in Albany has basically newspaper holdings on microfilm for most of the newspapers in the state. And this is giving you, and I have this link in your handout, this is giving you information about what titles they have by city. You can look at it by city, by county, or by title. And then it says access, borrow, and purchase. So there are ways to get a hold of some of these microfilm. The most likely way would be to borrow it, meaning you would go in, you would get the information off of this website, copy it down, go into your local library and ask them to borrow the microfilm on interlibrary loan for you. So that is definitely a possibility. And they say on their website that they will loan out these microfilm to other libraries. Now, some people have indexed and abstracted old newspapers as well. So you might find that somebody's already done that for the newspaper in the town that you're looking for. And those could be in a print format, in a book, in a periodical. Be sure you check Percy and check in the local libraries and archives for books that are indexing and abstracting newspaper articles. Okay, I promised we would talk about New York City very briefly, and it's going to have to be really brief. So New York City, what do we mean by that? We mean the 5 boroughs: Manhattan, Queens, Bronx, Staten Island, and Brooklyn. It was also formerly called New York County at one point. So that means the same thing, basically, New York City. Now, there is an archives in New York City called the New York City Municipal Archives, and they have a lot of records about New York City. And so there has been a book written about it called New York City Municipal Archives, an Authorized Guide by Aaron Goodwin. This is a great book that you should look at before you start on your New York City research. Vital Records. I told you it was different from the state, and it's really kind of complicated. So basically on this slide, you're going to have to look into this yourself, but basically the New York Municipal Archives is going to have older records, and then the newer records are going to be at the Department of Health for the births and deaths, and the city clerk for the marriages. And these are subject to privacy restrictions. So you won't be able to get the most recent ones unless you go through a lot of hoops. There are indexes online for New York City Vital Records on Ancestry and Family Search, and on a site called the Italian Genealogy Group, which I will show you in a minute. This is the Municipal Archives website. You can see that there's a link there that says historical records. That's probably where I would start. They have started to put their vital records online, and it is on this site here. It's called New York NYC Historical Vital Records Project. And this is in your handout. They're going to have the early births, marriages, and deaths. It's not going to be the more recent ones. And it's an ongoing project. So you can check it to see whether your ancestor is there, but they might not be. This is the Department of Health site where you're going to get the birth and death records of the later ones. And this is the clerk's office for the later marriage records. New York City Orphanages, I do want to mention this for a second. If you are in the Midwest or the West, you might have a story in your family about how an orphan was sent from out east and was adopted by your family. And they might have been called an orphan train rider, or it might have been said that they came on the orphan train. What that means is that orphanages in the East, many in New York City, but some in other places, did have too many orphans that were not being adopted. And so they came up with a scheme to send them west to families that wanted to adopt children. And they did travel by train, which is how they got to be called the orphan trains. But basically, what I wanted to say about this in conjunction with New York City is that there were two major orphanages that did participate in the effort that have kept records: the Children's Aid Society and the New York Foundling Hospital. These are both linked in your handout. They have records of the children that were sent west. So check that out if you have this story in your family about an orphan train or orphan train rider. There's also a new museum in Kansas that has recently opened up. It's called the National Orphan Train Complex. They also have some records. I'm unclear if they're like duplicate records from the two orphanages or if they're different records. So you want to check all three places. And I've had people tell me that they've had good success with this. And then I mentioned this briefly earlier, that New York City Catholic Records are getting put online onto Find My Past. And they're actually putting on a lot of different Catholic records from different places in the UK and in the US. But New York City is one of those places. And they're doing baptisms and marriages right now. And this is what the search page would look like in Find My Past. And I've had good luck with this as well. All right, we're going to real quick go through some libraries and archives in New York that you should know about. So first of all is the state archives, and I've mentioned them several times already. They are going to have records of state agencies, such as state land records, state military records, state prison records, state courts, state hospitals, colonial records other than the ones that were lost in the fire, and more. So you should visit them if you have an interest in these types of records. And they do have a website. You can look at finding aids and indexes and so forth. And there's a way to email them and, query them about certain things. This is what their website looks like. And you go to the research up there in the red box to get started. New York State Library. This is also in Albany, which is where the State Archives is located. And they are going to have things like books or materials on the history of the state, state and county genealogies and local histories, state military records, city directories and telephone books, newspapers, the New Netherland Research Center, and a digital library. They also have a website with finding aids and so forth, and they also will answer emails. So you want to check that out as well. This is what their site looks like. And then you go down there to Research Library. Okay, the New York Genealogical and Biographical Society. This is the State Genealogy Society. They have a website. They have some free materials on their website, and then they have a members only section, which I already talked about. They also have a print collection that is housed at the New York City Public Library in the Stephen Schwarzman building. You can visit there in person. This is their website here, and you can see online records and tools and resources are two of the places that you might want to look at. And then what do they have in the collection at the New York Public Library? They have books, they have research files, family Bibles, and manuscripts related to New York families and genealogy. You can send them an email and they will answer it. There's also a library catalog. If you ask them to do research for you, there will be a research fee. Now, generally at the New York Public Library, they have a lot of other stuff besides the Genealogy Society collection. They have things like city directories, New York City newspapers. They have a digital collection, which is photographs of New York City, mostly. Extensive information on buildings, neighborhoods, and houses in New York City. And again, they will answer short emails, but if you want them to do mail research for you, there will be a fee. They also have a library catalog and some research guides on their website to kind of help you get started. And this is their website, the New York Public Library. You want the local history and genealogy division. And this is where you would go to do that. National Archives, we kind of talked about this already. The National Archives is divided up into regional branches. And so the one that serves New York State is the one in New York City, the New York City branch. They also serve New Jersey, Puerto Rico, and U.S. Virgin Islands. And so they're going to have federal records from those four states and regions, basically. And you can see there. They have a pretty good website and they give you some ideas of what their collection entails and how you can order some records online from them. So this is what the National Archives of the New York City branch looks like. And then you can go from there and kind of poke around and see what they have. We already talked about the New York City Municipal Archives. We talked about how there is a guidebook that gives you a great deal of detail about what they actually have. And they also have the website that has some finding aids and some search forms to order by mail. So, and that's what their website looks like. Now, there are a couple other websites that I put in your handout, and I just would mention them really quickly. Italian Genealogy group, they have these databases, and these are for New York City. They put together a lot of indexes of records of New York City. And it's not just limited to Italians, it's for anybody in New York City to look at. So check that out, that's in your syllabus. This is the New Netherland Research Center. This is in Albany, I believe at the State Library building. This would be for researching Dutch New York. New York Historical Society Library. They also will have a nice collection and you can check it out on their website. And then the Statue of Liberty Ellis Island Foundation. You can search passenger lists on this website here. So if you had people that came into Ellis Island, that would be 1892 and going forward in time, you can search the site, and they have a different indexing than Ancestry and Family Search do. So when I can't find somebody on Ancestry and Family Search, I will sometimes go here to this site and look for them, and sometimes I can find them. So this is an alternate way to look for passenger lists coming into Ellis Island. With that, I have talked your leg off here, and I am just about done. So here's some final tips for researching in New York. Never give up, look everywhere, utilize periodicals, ask for help, contact the county and town historians, DNA testing. I didn't really talk about that, but that could be a way to get through some of your brick walls, church records, and research the family fully in the other states that they lived in after they left New York. Maybe you'll get some more hints about where they were from in New York. All right, I think that we are ready for questions.
Thank you, Sarah. That was a lot of information in a
I
very
know.
short amount of time.
I just talked and talked and talked.
That was exhausted. I really enjoyed the fact that people were putting a lot of suggestions and things that they found helpful in the chat. And
that's great.
I think that's absolutely amazing. And you guys, that's what we want. We want you to share, collaborate, all those things in the chat. So thank you. The chat is available to you. Send us an email, genealogy@acpl.info, and we will send it to you once it's been edited. So usually it takes about a day or so. And then it has been recorded. It will be on our YouTube. It'll just take us a little bit. We think it should be up before the new year. So cross fingers. So thank you guys. There are questions, Sarah. I was trying to answer some because I knew there'd be a lot. So you ready?
Yes.
All right, let's do this. So this first person's having trouble finding records for Essex and Clinton County, especially just that region. What suggestions do you have? And guys in the chat, if you have suggestions, you've researched this, please throw it in too.
Well, I haven't researched those counties, so this is just going to be off the top of my head. Have you been on Family Search? Have you looked at the catalog? Have you also been to the Family Search Wiki, which I did not mention in this talk, but it is linked in your handout. If you just Google Family Search Wiki, it will come up with a map of the world, and you can type in a location like Essex County, New York, and you should get a wiki page for that particular county that will give you all sorts of resources and information on researching Essex County. Exactly. Oh, and Allison's going to show it to us. So here we go. Also, that research gazetteer that I mentioned at the very beginning of this talk will have a whole chapter on each of those counties. So yeah, lots of stuff there. And
yeah, it looks
all of the things that are in blue are links that you can click on, I believe. So
I would also go here.
Yeah, the catalog. Precisely. But it's possible that those counties may have had a fire. I don't know, where some records were destroyed, and that would be unfortunate, but could be.
Yeah. Okay. It looks like some people have been putting information in, so that's fantastic. All right. So colonial, do you have suggestions for somebody looking specifically for colonial?
The guidebooks that we talked about in this presentation, definitely we're going to have like that New York and the Revolutionary War. If you're looking at that time period, that's a great one. The New York, I would say the New York State Archives, they are the ones that have a lot of the colonial records that have survived. So try that.
Okay. And guys, again, chat, go for it. This is a general question, but I thought it was appropriate. Do county historians charge a fee for information?
I don't know. I have been to a couple of the county historian's office in person. And so in person, they did not. Perhaps if you are contacting them by mail, they may charge you a copy fee or a small research fee. But since they are like a county office, like the county clerk or the county recorder's office, or, they're just basically another county office, county funded office, I don't think they would charge you a lot. I would think there would be a copy fee, but I do not know that for certain. And they may each do something different in each of the counties. So yeah.
Check. It doesn't hurt to ask.
Check them. Yeah. Check it out.
So here's one that I think is actually really interesting. And again, hive mind, if you have any ideas. Do you have any suggestions if the county or town, city, village historian will not return either emails or phone calls? I have tried to contact them for the past 4 years. 4 years.
Unfortunately, this might be a case where, it's a volunteer person in that town or village historian position, and they may have gone AWOL and are not answering, people. And I've heard that from other people that some people have had that experience, and then other people have had wonderful experience with the town or the village historian. I think it just kind of depends. Usually, I think when that happens, they try to appoint somebody different, like the county will try to get somebody else in there. So if maybe you tried 4 years ago and you haven't tried since then, you might see if a different person is now listed as the village historian. They might have replaced that person. You could also try to contact, the town clerk and just, ascertain from them, does this town have a historian? Who is it? Make sure you have the correct information, the contact is correct and all of that. And they might say to you, oh, well, Joe died and, obviously we haven't replaced him yet. Or, they could give you some inside information. It's more like, yeah, you're going to have to do some detective work, I think, to try to figure it out. I'm sorry that happened. Here I was like going on about how great it is. And you're like, no, it's not.
I'll also throw in my 2 cents. Librarians are also very helpful.
Yeah, the local librarian might be able to give you some tips about it or some alternative suggestions if the town historian's no longer, with us, what you should do instead.
Thank you. Would some of the records be held at the colleges in Upper Western New York?
I do not know that off the top of my head. I know that in certain areas, yes, colleges have, like college archives, college special collections have been gifted like local history collections. And so you could certainly check. That's probably what I would look at the college library and archives page on the internet, on their website, and see if there's any local history collections that they might have. Oh, definitely, that is another place to look. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I was going to say, I found some cool stuff in some college archives. Never know what you can find.
Yes.
You covered church records. This person is specifically looking for Catholic church records in Syracuse from 1850 to 1950.
If they're not on Family Search and they're not on microfilm at the local library in Syracuse, and I know that some of the places in New York do have their local Catholic records microfilmed and in the public library. I don't know if Syracuse is one of those. I kind of suspect it is not. You might have to try the diocese or the just contacting the church itself, and you're going to have different results. I mean, you may or may not get anywhere with that, but yeah.
But first you don't succeed, try again.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, so this one I've been working on, and I found it right before you started taking questions. Where to find coroner records. This one is a specific county. I'm going to butcher it. Sorry, y'all. It's Onondaga County medical. They called that medical examiner's office, and they didn't know where records older than 10 years were kept. I'm looking to find one from 1901.
Did you say you found something about this? Go ahead.
Yeah, I did. So I found the retention schedule for New York. And the retention schedule is not great. So it says violent cases are permanent and then natural death are 20 years. But then it says records of coroner's inquest filed before September 1st, 1965 with county clerks are in fact records of the county court. And so they're not part of this retention schedule. But then it goes on and talks about if there's no investigation, retention 6 years. Motor vehicle death, 6 years, etc.
I think probably, I don't know. In Indiana, it's kind of, I don't know what the retention schedule here is, but I know that certain counties kept their records and other counties were like, oh, throw these away as soon as the time is up. We need to keep them 20 years. Okay, 21 years, this is out the door. So it depends on the county, I think, whether you have somebody that just kind of squirreled them away in the courthouse somewhere and forgot about them, or whether, you've got somebody that's actively throwing things away when they are allowed to be thrown away. So it never hurts to kind of ask around, like the courthouse, checking, of course, family search catalog, like we already talked about, looking for coroner's records and in various court records to see if you can find anything. Sometimes the coroner's inquest court proceedings would be in the court books. Like you might not have the file that gives all the juicy details, but there might be something just in the court minutes saying that the coroner's jury met to talk about the death of so-and-so and that kind of thing.
Yeah. So it looked like it was the county clerk's office or county court, the county court, as opposed to the medical examiner's office or the health department. So it looks like it's a court record as opposed to a health record.
Very good.
So for that one. Okay, so next, deeds. Okay, I came across a series of deeds where heirs are selling a piece of real estate that belonged to their father, grandfather. A master in chancery is indicated in these deeds, but there isn't a chancery court in Dutchess County from the time period 1818. Where might I find historic chancery court records?
I don't know, but I've been to Dutchess County before, and I believe that they have a Dutchess County archives or something of that sort. They have a county-wide office that collects old records for Dutchess County. And I would think that they would know, or they might have them there, or they might know where they would be located. So that might be an option for you. Let me see if I can find that real quick.
So I think also, just because you said that there wasn't a chancery court in Dutchess County from that time period, I wonder if it was filed in a neighboring county.
Oh, could be, yeah.
So that's the first thing that popped in my mind. So I would start looking at some of the neighboring counties.
There is a Dutchess County archives, and that's who I'm thinking would have. That's what I was thinking about. So just kind of Google that and you should be able to get to that website. Or the county historian might be able to tell you also.
Perfect. Okay, so any specific suggestions for finding records on Polish immigrants to New York who came from the Pale outside of the normal channels we all know? They've been stuck on this one for 10 years.
Well, I'm unclear whether you're asking about their records once they got to the US and they're in New York, or if you're asking for like how to get back into Poland and Polish records. I do know that there are a couple of really nice genealogy societies out in the New England, New York area for Polish research. Was it the Polish Genealogy Society of Connecticut that you were recently speaking to, Allison?
Yes.
Do you remember their official name? Yeah, okay. They're a really great group, and I believe they offer Zoom sessions. So if you're not able to get to their sessions, you could watch them online, Polish Genealogy Society of Connecticut. And they've got a lot of people there that are very up on doing research in Poland and doing research in New England, New York areas of the country. So that might be a resource for you if you weren't already familiar with them.
I just put the link in the chat.
Cool.
Any sources available for loyalists who may have served from New York?
I know there are a lot of print guides to loyalists, and I think they would be in that New York and the Revolution book, because even though that's, you know, a book about, you might think it's about the people that served, I think it also covered loyalists, although I'm not 100% sure of that. If they went to Canada per se, then there are a lot of resources in Canada about the United Empire Loyalists, is what they call them. And you'll find things if you look for the records of the family in Canada.
Thank you. Okay. So looks like there's a couple questions left. We'll try to fly through those two, and then we're going to be done, guys.
Yep.
So,
yep.
If the only verified information you have is the date of birth from an 1850 census that states an individual was born in New York in 1812, where would you first look for further information?
I'm assuming, but you don't say this for sure, that they are living in a different state by 1850. Is that? So let's go with that. Let's go with that interpretation of the question. So they moved to a different state. Let's say maybe they're in Michigan, because a lot of people in Michigan came from New York. At least that's what happened in my family. So you got them in Michigan, or you got them in whatever state that they ended up in 1850. So that's really your starting point. Is all you really got is them in that location in 1850. So really research the heck out of a family in Michigan or in the new state that they had moved to, trying to look at records like county histories, deed records sometimes would say so-and-so bought land in this county and he is from this other county. So it might say, you know, John Brown of Dutchess County, New York is buying land here in Michigan. And then you'd know that he's from Dutchess County, and you can look in the Dutchess County records. You need to find a record in the new state that they're living in that gives you the clue on where in New York State they came from. So you really got to research the heck out of the whole family, the mom, the dad, the kids, the in-laws, the outlaws, anybody that you find that is associated with that family in their new state, to try to get clues on where to look in New York State for that, for their records earlier.
Thank you. All right, this is going to be our last question. And if we didn't get to your question or you have further questions, please feel free to email us, genealogy@acpl.info. Please, please, please. We want you to be successful. We want to help you. So please email us. Also email us for a copy of the chat if you would like to request it. All right, last one. They're looking for information on prisoners of the British in Manhattan during the Revolution.
Well, I don't know personally what types of things you want to do here. You might contact some of the research libraries that we were talking about in New York City that might have some information, or you might try at the New York State Archives in Albany, because they might have some information on military, what happened in the revolution in New York. Maybe the Family Search Wiki would have some ideas, and Allison showed us how to use the Family Search Wiki earlier. I don't know. It would be something that you're going to have to like beat the bushes for. And there might be some information about that in that New York in the Revolution book by Eric Grunset. So that's, yeah, I'm sorry. That's not a topic that I am very familiar with.
It's okay, me either, but I just did some research and I'm very fascinated. Apparently one of the more notorious ones was a sugar house. Sugar house prison. So
okay, you put that in the chat. Yep, I see it.
Yeah, there's an article, a talk that's done by a professor that talks about this and gives more information. So I would definitely look into that, and then probably look into what else this professor has done, because if they're doing a talk, they probably have a book, articles, other things that would be incredibly helpful for this.
Yeah, they probably published about it before.
So hopefully that'll help solve some of those mysteries.
Okay.
So, all right. So we are done with questions for today. Thank you so much, Sarah, for a wonderful presentation. I know everybody got a lot out of it. Guys, look at the handout. It is chock full of information. So make sure that you are going through it pretty thoroughly, clicking on all the links and seeing what they are. But thank you for joining us for another Genealogy Center program, and we hope to see you on Thursday. So have a wonderful day. Bye, everyone.
Bye.